Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again with another episode of Afghan Suffer. And today we have another very special guest with us, Mina Jan. I would not waste a lot of your time by introducing her, but I will let her take the initiative and introduce herself. Salam, Mina Jan.
Salam alaikum. Thank you so much for having me here. I think it's really important for people Afghans in the diaspora to sort of take a lead on narratives that are towards learning about each other, towards learning about our future, just a lot of healing and having conversations with each other is where that starts. So I really applaud you for that. Thank you for having me here for it. I am actually a fellow diaspora raised anyway. I was born in Afghanistan. I was raised in Canada. And then in 2005, I returned to Afghanistan and I lived there for about 15 years. My background is in media, so television and radio production. And that is under which category I went to Afghanistan as a volunteer for trainer to be a trainer with women managed radio stations throughout Afghanistan. I ended up staying for, like I said, 15 years. I came back in 2019, so I'm in Canada again. And now I'm working on just a number of projects I'm happy to share with you guys. Mostly it's volunteer work that I've been doing for the last 3 years.
Amazing, Mirajan. You know that it's very rare for people who have been in Western society and then go back home. It's a cultural shock, and then from there you come back to Western society. Then it's culture shock number two.
Yeah,
because then you're like, oh my god, what the hell?
Yeah.
What was I living? So, do you mind sharing some of those stories with us?
Sure. I have been like refugeed. That's for sure. I was the first time, the first time was obviously more, what I always say was more my parents' story. I was the baby that was with them. And yeah, although it's part of, what makes my identity, it's in my DNA, the traumas of the leaving and the escaping. At the end of the day, it's more their story. And so having experienced now in my adulthood, the all my belongings are in Afghanistan and all my friends are dispersed, and it's obviously a much different experience than theirs, a lot less traumatic, but it still gave me a taste of it. And it's a real shock to the system when you have a vision of what you want your future to be. And I certainly wanted my future to be in Afghanistan, or at least in and out of Afghanistan, and to have that choice taken away from me was it took me a while to sort of, I'm still in the process of kind of gathering myself from the shock of that and trying to think of, how to be planted on the ground here while still not giving up on what I want for Afghanistan.
Interesting. So, what was one thing that stood out to you when you went to Afghanistan for the first time? Any specific memory that comes to mind that just stands out?
That's a hard one because I guess if you're talking about like the when I first arrived, I can narrow it down to that. I suppose
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of surprises, and I'll tell you why. Not because I knew what I was expecting, but I really went in with a mentality of like no expectations. If anything, I had negative expectations, which were implanted in my mind from growing up in the West. Not that people that I had believed something negative about Afghanistan on purpose, but because the headlines were so limited to war related, or
Yeah.
the misogyny or the sort of control aspects, that I couldn't help but have that in the back of my mind. And it was also reinforced by our own community, really, like, you're not going to be able to handle it there. It's so intense. And so I didn't really get a lot of encouragement, which made it,
Yeah.
I was still going to go. But I really thought, like, okay, the only positive thing that people really talked about was the taste of the fruit. And I thought, like, okay, I'm, I was really, really given not a lot of, expectations to demand of
Mhm.
anyone. So I think that was a kind of a great thing in the end, because I ended up
Mhm.
being surprised on almost every aspect. So it was really a lot more,
Mhm.
way more relaxed than I thought it would be
Mhm.
living there. I was certainly more welcome than I thought I would have been by
Mhm.
far. I was not as challenged with language as I was worried I would be.
Mhm.
And I was not even challenged as a woman as much as I thought I would be. In some cases I was, but in
Yeah.
many cases I was not. So there were a lot of
Mhm.
surprises for me in that defied stereotypes that had gone in.
Yeah. So like most of the experiences that you had went towards the positive side of things.
Oh yeah, for
Okay,
me.
because this is something that comes up again and again with every conversation, that a lot of people who had that experience of
Mhm.
either going to Afghanistan or just experience it from their chats with Afghans or anything pretty much. They're like, hold on. This is I didn't know Afghans have this behavior or that behavior, and normally like it's a shock to them because all they see is like, oh, war, terrorism, and like fights back to back, and then especially when it's a female. A lot of the time that I get the questions is like, you people oppress your woman,
Mhm.
and 99% of the time my response is like, when you say you people, could you please define it? Because you people is such a broad term. But since you alluded to the fact that you as a female, when you got to Afghanistan, you didn't feel challenged, would you like to elaborate a little bit just for the viewers who think that, well, Afghans are these like, cavemen, they don't know how to react around women.
Well, I mean, didn't say I wasn't challenged. I just said it wasn't as
Hmm.
challenging as I had anticipated for sure.
Hmm.
And if anything, I was as challenged by the Western colleagues and Western
Hmm.
interactions that I had there for being a female
Hmm.
as I was by the Afghan colleagues. So meaning I
Yeah.
didn't face any more than I from
Yeah.
my Afghan community than from, for example, if I had any interaction with military. That was It was
Hmm.
absolutely the same, if not worse, from the Western perspective. But um, the thing is, at the end of the day, we're all pretty colonized by our Western upbringing, and it's a dramatic word for
Hmm.
some people, but that's like the definition of what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Colonizing a people is convincing them of things too, and it's
Yes.
very much been a part of our culture to be, or sorry, about of our history to have been,
Hmm.
first made to become refugees and then made to feel less than when we are refugees, and then when we are in this host country that we're supposed to be so
Yeah.
grateful for, we're also reminded that everyone back where we're from is savage and backwards. So
Hmm.
you're going to have to find your space in that and realize that somewhere in there it doesn't add up, right? So if we're
Hmm.
so savage, then what is everyone doing over there? Why are they trying to anyway, so the point is,
Hmm.
I think I'm not really willing to defend us in this guess what
Yeah.
we're civilized kind of way. I find that
Hmm.
argument very offensive. There was a
Of
journalist who had
course.
said something about being civilized, and I didn't love everyone's reaction. Everyone was trying to prove how
Hmm.
civilized we are, and that's I think that's a condition of that same colonization of trying to prove
Yeah.
yourself worthy, and I'm not going to
Hmm.
do that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's not like all rainbows and unicorns. Of course, we have had our problems, and it stems from like these decades of war that we have been facing. But at the same time, I feel like there are a lot of untold stories, a lot of things that we haven't touched on. Uh, let's begin with the fact that, 15 years in Afghanistan. I understand like you might not give us a lot of details, but just in a nutshell, tell give us some experiences, some stories that viewers would love to hear.
Um, I did meet a lot of extended family.
Hmm.
I don't think anyone can answer, when we're asked, do you still have family in Afghanistan? I mean, essentially, we all do. In the broad
Hmm.
sense, we're all family to each other, but also we do come from really large families, and like
Mm-hmm.
anyone else, I had my
Yes.
parents' extended family. My family was mostly in Canada, but my
Mm-hmm.
parents' cousins and whatnot were all based in Afghanistan. So um, I don't know that I have a particular story. I was again, it was so many years of integrating with them, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
may have been that initially I might have had those same ideas that maybe they wouldn't be excited to see me or approving of me because I was there by myself and I wasn't quite
Mm-hmm.
as conservative as they were, just
Mm-hmm.
by the fact alone that I was traveling to Afghanistan by myself. So,
Mm-hmm.
you wonder if you're going to be accepted or if they're going to look down on you if
Yeah.
they're very conservative and wonder, how are you traveling alone? What is this about? And they were
Mm-hmm.
very, very welcoming. And they usually, not only my family, but just in general, people would ask in a surprised way, like, what how did you come here by yourself? And you explain, I had this job, this position that I came for, and my parents were supportive, and I wanted to be a part of Afghanistan's rebuilding, or uh, do my do my part in being a part of whatever happens next, is a better way to say it.
Yeah.
And and it only took a minute or two, and then people just tend to really consider you someone who's really they'll call you really nice words like brave and patriotic, because they understand that you really didn't have to leave the comforts that you
Yeah.
left, and they're also very much under an impression that it's life is very perfect over here. So for them to see you leave that and come to live in Afghanistan, I think a lot of times it really touched people in a positive way. So that was my general experience with family and with colleagues, and with people who spoke to me for a little while and understood that I had come very much by choice,
Yeah.
um, and that it meant something special to me. On a professional side, I really enjoyed. I did a lot of media work that was more general, with TVs and with radio, and we did like government PSAs, so meaning public service
Mm-hmm.
announcements that are in support of
Yeah.
health or education or whatever else. And those were
Mm-hmm.
great. But what I really enjoyed was working on children's educational programming. So I worked with Bkhshi, which is the Afghan version of Sesame Street, and then an independent children's television show as well. And that took me to many, many provinces and really showed me that within Afghanistan, which is, they say, about the size of Texas, although I don't know if that's 100% accurate, um, that within that space, there are different worlds and different
Mm-hmm.
cultures, and it's so varied from one place to another that it became fascinating for me to learn about
Yeah.
the differences within ourselves, and not differences in a separating kind of way, but really what makes each
Mm-hmm.
province so unique. And there's different cultures and different clothing and different foods and different customs,
Yeah.
and I found that fascinating in my professional side.
It's it is beautiful, and especially that you experience this, because a lot of the time, like people, when they ask me about back home, because the last time I was in Afghanistan was in 2021 before coming to Canada, so it was literally right before the collapse.
Okay.
And up until then, things were like, it's going to get better, things will change, probably for the good. A lot of time people would have asked me, like, what are you hoping, like, you can leave whenever you want. And I was like, it's not so much about leaving, but like just staying and keep that hope alive. Because if if all of us leave, who's going to take care of this country? Because it has happened before. We had these mass exodus
Absolutely.
before, where in the 80s, in the 90s, and then in 2000s again. Like it keeps on repeating.
Yeah.
And one of the conversations that keep coming up again and again is the matter of diversity.
Yeah.
Is people out here, I feel like there's a misconception that, okay, all Afghans, they're just out, you're Afghani, right? And I was like, yes, we are Afghans, but like this country is so diverse. Like you
Mm.
have no clue. Like yes, we have our differences, uh, which oftentimes may cause some disunity among us. But
Yeah.
it comes again and again. But it all comes from the diversity factor of Afghanistan. As
Right.
you said, each province is unique in its own way. Um, so let's go there. How many provinces did you visit, and which one stood out to you significantly?
I okay. First, I always like to be transparent and clear and honest. Sometimes I count the provinces that I drove through as a check mark. And I think I should be honest about that. Just I didn't have
Okay.
nice long 2 weeks in each province that I went to. So let's just
Okay.
let I'm going to be transparent about that. Sometimes I just saw it from a car window, but I
Yeah.
did. If you include that, see 30 of the provinces, and there was four that I
Mhm.
didn't see. So it's more about see. Generally, I saw all of the different
Mhm.
directions of Afghanistan, and so they, to me, I put them in sort of a regional sense because a lot of those
Yeah.
province lines, as you know, were drawn up at different times. And so when your
Mhm.
parents will talk about a province, it didn't exist in the same way that it does now, or the
Mhm.
whole East is usually considered one area by some people. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it wasn't like that intricate, but where stood out to me is such a hard one because I hate saying the obvious stuff. You want to be unique and say, say a
No,
random
please,
don't
please.
want to always say the same answers, but I will never deny that Banda Amir in Bamyan is the most beautiful place in the
Oh.
world. It's the province that I have. Um, I mean, every province has treated me so well, but it's a province that I've
Mhm.
stayed in for like a longer period. So you almost feel like
Yeah.
you actually live there. I didn't stay in hotels every time. I oftentimes stayed with families.
Mhm.
I've also spent a lot of time in villages that are outside of Bamyan City,
Mhm.
that you take a car up to a certain way, um, an hour and a half, I think almost 2 hours by car, and then the rest is by foot for another hour. And it's not that I hadn't done that in other provinces, but in the Bamyan one, years later, I came back to the same village, and then again years later, I came back to the same village. So these are families that I
Yeah.
got to revisit and who remembered me so clearly, and it's particularly special to me. But at the same time, then there's a whole different world in like in the East when in Jalalabad, for example, I have very
Mhm.
wonderful memories of sitting on rooftops and having delicious fish and these are
Oh.
yeah, these are wonderful memories. But the thing is, I have sets of memories, sets of like where you saw something beautiful or when you went on.
Mhm.
I'm sure you had picnics with families that stand out.
Yeah.
What I miss about Afghanistan is not really those tourist moments or those visiting moments.
Mhm.
It's my daily life. Like
Yeah.
in the morning, on the way, get a fresh juice if I'm lucky, and then go to work and have time with my colleagues. And after that, go home on the way home, get my groceries. Like I miss just actually living there. Not
Mhm.
the kind of, photo ops that I have a bunch of photos from Afghanistan, but they're the times when you do something interesting, like have a
Mhm.
picnic or go on a trip to Mazar or something like, which was wonderful,
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
was day-to-day life. I miss day-to-day life more than I miss any of that. I really miss just having my own friends near me, my family near me, and just it was everything out. Your surroundings were just your whole life.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I totally understand. There's this. So in a previous conversation, basically in the last episode that we released, we were in talks with a female tutor educator from Kabul. So she's still in Kabul, and just because of how things have changed recently for women,
Mhm.
she was telling us her experience with like how she's continuing her work in education side of things. Like she has classes online and in person.
Mm.
And one of the interesting things that came up was, so us sitting out here, when we hear about these new laws
Mhm.
that that come out of Afghanistan, we're like, oh shit, things are getting bad again. And I brought it up with her. I was like, tell me, is that true? Like, you guys can't leave homes anymore? Like, you can't talk, you have to be fully covered, no more classes for female. And she said that it's not all of that. Like, yes, they have applied this law, but at the same time we do have classes. Yes, they do come in, they check on us, they make sure that everyone is covered in the proper attire.
Mhm.
There are no males sitting in the class, the buildings are separate, but things are okay-ish. Like, we are continuing, we are moving forward, and there's still hope. And when I compare that to, say, 5 years ago, let's say,
Mm.
when, or even when you were in Afghanistan, there was no such thing. Like, I remember Kabul streets being so vibrant, especially like just trotting down shouting now.
Yeah.
Excuse me. There was no concept of like, nobody will question what you are wearing. Yes, there will be like a one or two who would have that like a side eye, but
Yeah.
things were so different. Like, just being in that part of the city where you could walk freely, have your fresh juice, or have your coffee, like
Like,
whatever
I'm
you are
very also
into.
now when I'm like, yeah, I have my fresh juice in the morning. It wasn't often, I promise, but it was great.
It's but just to your point, like that day-to-day life,
Mm.
which a lot of the media out here, or even the media from our country, oftentimes they ignore that fact that we actually had really good lives.
Yeah.
we we lived a good life. Like,
Yeah.
there was a sense of community. uh so it just keeping that in the back of your mind, and now, like, after spending 15 years in Afghanistan and you coming back to Canada, now that you see or hear these stories, how does that connect for you? Like, where does your mind go? Or like,
So when okay, so the first sort of topic you hit on, which is like, okay, some stuff, it moves forward.
mhm,
Even when we
yeah,
see on YouTube, I'm sure everyone's family watches, the Afghan families tend
mhm,
to watch, the tours of the city, not
yeah,
necessarily the foreign led ones, but even the Afghans who have their own show,
mhm,
عنوان and those types. Um,
yeah,
and we see that women are still walking around, we see that they're
mhm,
still there, and I think that's a really dangerous um, thing for people to take as the way you decide what's happening in a country, because
mhm,
at the end of the day, a country's population is protected by the laws that they live under, right? So
yeah,
just because something hasn't been enforced yet, or it's being enforced
mhm,
gradually, or it's being enforced when they feel like it, that puts
mhm,
you at as much danger as if it was overnight snap, women are not allowed
of
to do anything.
course,
It's being more gradual, and I think that that's methodical. Like, I think that there's a reason that that's happening, is because they're testing the waters. They're taking their time with it, because they have the whole world watching in a way that wasn't happening in the 90s. So I don't want to go too into that, because I know we're not going to have those serious analytical talks, luckily. But at the same time, when I hear that, that's what I'm always worried about, because I have
mhm,
um, my networks in Afghanistan too, and that's not. I understand that it's not an overnight change in every single
mhm,
aspect, but they're
yeah,
always anticipating, what's next that's going to change, and what's next that's going to change, and what's next. And will they eventually just say, as of today, you cannot leave your house? You never know, because
mhm,
there's no one to protect you from anything like that.
of course,
So I have trouble imagining that, because I know that when I speak to them, they're just in a constant state of anxiety of what's going to come worse. And in the time that I lived in Afghanistan, there was a lot of discomfort. I mean, we were always worried about insecurity that was happening mostly from the people who are in charge right now. We always had to worry about,
mhm,
when we actually leave our house, um, could something really bad happen, an explosion, a violent attack. That was our main concern, and we didn't, you know, it wasn't, whereas now that's not the main concern, and I understand that, but it's the oppressive control that
Yeah.
people are I'll give you an example. Like actually in Dubai, okay? In Dubai,
Hmm.
everything looks totally, totally relaxed and free, and you can do whatever you want, and it's a tourist place, and
Hmm.
it's uh, nobody would ever think of Dubai as oppressive. But if you look closely, their laws are really, really stringent, and if you were to upset their authorities in a under one of those particular laws that they have,
Hmm.
what you're wearing to the mall and it's short sleeve, and they said don't wear short. If you upset the wrong officer, their laws are not designed to protect you. You're not as free as you think, and you could be very easily penalized. It's very, very. It's a very like not as scary an example in Dubai, right?
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, you need to look at where you're going to be protected should something bad happen to you. You can't feel safe if you don't have that. And that we don't have in Afghanistan. So that's what I worry about. Whereas as awful as we had situations then from security wise to who was in leadership, which we're not going to talk about, but we still had I had anyway a sense that worst case, even if this authority is really corrupt or unhelpful, there is always someone you can call. You can keep
Hmm.
going. You had the sense that ultimately you were
Hmm.
the law was on your side to have your basic rights and to have your you know obviously a lot went wrong in that department too, but to not have that, to have
Hmm.
who are you going to pick up the phone and call if something awful happens? That is a sense of fear that I think is really inhumane
Hmm.
to live under.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And well, as much as that we feel like the dark times uh, for the Afghans,
Yeah.
and for the Afghanistan is approaching and it's in progress. But if the glass is half empty, it's also half full.
Yes.
So there's hope, like here and there. Like people still feel like something good can come out of it, especially like um, one of the reasons when I thought about starting Afghan Safar
Hmm.
was the fact that Afghan diaspora, like there's like millions of us all across the world, and in our own capacity, people are waking. People are still contributing to Afghanistan and to its people, in in whatever shape or form.
Yes.
So when I know you touched slightly on the fact that you still have your connections in Afghanistan, but after you left Afghanistan, did you still continue your work in one way or another? Did you still kind of held on to one thread?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously not my daily office work. It
Mhm.
was, but so my volunteer work in while I was in Afghanistan was usually in response to something like, God forbid,
Mhm.
a big attack should happen. We would
Mhm.
start to gather funds for the families of the victims
Mhm.
for their medical care, or God forbid, if
Mhm.
they lost someone, for funeral costs, things like that. That was just an
Yeah.
automatic response, and I learned that from my own community. Like that's what Afghans did. You just stood up and found a way to help this
Mhm.
family, found a way to help that family. Um, that is the part that I think I kept on the most after I left, because it really felt like an emergency situation, since the days that we were
Mhm.
seeing people relocate from Herat to Kabul and from Kunduz to Kabul when as the cities were
Yeah.
falling. So ever
Mhm.
since then, which I guess was technically a really long time ago, it's just felt like an emergency situation. So gathering support from the community, which I had already established a bit of a trust with my community,
Mhm.
even from when I was in Afghanistan, saying like,
Mhm.
it's a natural instinct here that we just collect from each other and distribute, and I'll show you
Yeah.
what we did, and that's that. So it was already a set up system. It was already a
Mhm.
set up system that if I shared with family and friends that there was a need, that they would give what they could, and that started to expand
Mhm.
to people I didn't know on Instagram and on mostly on Instagram, to be honest. Twitter is a very dark and ugly place, but Instagram is very helpful, and
Yeah.
people were very generous. So that continued, and then uh, throughout the years, there's been other projects that have happened too, meaning
Mhm.
a sewing circle that we did for Afghan women who had lost their jobs, so they have something. I mean, obviously, we don't want all the women in Afghanistan to become seamstresses. At the end of the day, how many seamstresses can a
Mhm.
country employ? You know, but at
Of
that
course.
time, it was the only safe that we could think of. So we did that. So there's been
Mhm.
projects. I can't probably list all of them. It's boring, but at the end of the day, we really are, mostly those of us who are linked still to the country are always willing to support, one
Mhm.
way or another that we can help in smaller brackets.
Mhm.
It's hard to decide, I'm going to build this school or I'm going to do that. That's Even if I had the option, it's so complicated to know what this future looks like. So we just try to keep
Mhm.
families fed, safe, employed in some way or another, like even buying them
Yeah.
chickens and chicken feed so they can sell the eggs and survive.
That's beautiful because I mean the reason I touched on it is because so when I was young,
Hmm.
my Padarjan used to tell me this story, which he heard from his granddad probably, and then the one before him. But this is a very common story. I think everyone has heard it in their lifetime once or twice. It's like his great grandfather told his son that "I watan az ma nist, ya shamas." It will be
Hmm.
built then. Like this homeland is not ours.
Yeah.
This is yours. It
Hmm.
will be built in your time. And then the grandfather told the same thing to his son that this homeland is not ours. This will be yours. It will be built in your time. And that just trickled down to me. So my dad used to tell me like, because I mean, my experiences of like a war-torn Afghanistan, like born and raised in it during the time of war, and then anytime I would complain about it, Padajan would tell me like, this homeland, this is not mine. This will be yours. It will
This
be
will be
built in
yours.
your
It
time.
belongs to you. Yeah.
And throughout this journey, I've constantly been thinking. I was like, am I supposed to say the same thing to my son? Like this is not mine. This is yours. It will build that. But just like that, there are like tons of stories that are passed down from our parents, like generation to generation. Anything of the sort that comes to your mind, like from your mom or from your dad, something that you got to Afghanistan, you were like, oh, they were right.
Yeah, yeah. I will say it's positive from me again. I think
Hmm.
my parents really um, told me and showed me by their own
Hmm.
example that coexistence is a big part of our culture, who we are.
Yeah.
So they never denied to me that there were that people there were m- just marginalized communities. So there were some that were
Hmm.
treated way worse than others, right?
Yeah.
That I knew
Hmm.
going in. But the coexistence, the day to day, like you to your neighbor, to your neighbor, to your neighbor, um,
Hmm.
that it's part of who we are. It's not just we happen to get along sometimes. It was very much a part of
Yeah.
our culture to have, even different religions getting along with each other, different backgrounds getting along with each other. Um, it was not a dividable country. Divide and conquer is the oldest trick in the book, and it's been tried on our country
Hmm.
a lot, and it's never even made, the slightest hint of success, um,
Hmm.
in in the narrative the way that it has
Yeah.
now. But
Hmm.
in sorry, I'm digressing a little bit. In the I think in the glass half full part of that is that there
Hmm.
was that discrimination that was happening systematically, not necessarily
Hmm.
as much between people, but systematically.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just time for that to crumble. So maybe we needed to just kind of hit a rock bottom so we can build something up that is a more genuine coexistence, not only between people and their neighbors, which we have, a great
Hmm.
deal of that, but to have it right from the top so that we really are representing everybody, in a more equal way, and that
Hmm.
way. what we know is our natural nature can also be reflected in a more national way.
Yeah.
But they told me that before. They said it's not. It's not this group and that group and this group and that.
Hmm.
It's really not. Like
Yeah.
it's the wrong impression to have. You know that you.
Hmm. I mean, things that I know, I'm scared to bring them up because it might open like cans of
You're
worms.
right. It's complicated, right? Like there's so many. You
Yeah.
can't make a broad statement. Like if I say we all do coexist, anybody could argue against that and they would be correct because there's so many examples of
Yeah.
when we don't. But
Hmm.
it is important to remember that it is our instinct, majority
Yeah.
wise, that we do want to coexist, and we
Of
develop
course.
a lot of animosity and really bad
Hmm.
treatment towards each other as time goes, and that's brought from the
Yeah.
top down. That's not brought from the bottom up. It's not.
100%.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the
No, I.
positive is that it's not in our nature. you know
It's definitely not. No, we are
Of
very friendly. We are very calm, hospitable people.
you like
Like
each
I don't
other.
know.
You do.
Yes, yes. We. I mean, I don't know if you experienced this. So, like in Kabul, I mean that's where I spend most of my time. Like
Okay.
most of my life has been spent in Kabul, and so anytime we had a new neighbor,
Mhm.
like especially like if they were like your next door neighbor
Yeah.
or something, you would the first night everyone will take food for them
Food. Yeah.
as a welcome,
Yeah.
like thank you for choosing this neighborhood, welcome.
Mhm.
Hope
Yeah.
you feel at home. One of the very interesting things that happened to me when I first got to Canada was I got here during a time in 2021. It was still like COVID, and I didn't know anyone, to be honest. Like Vancouver was I was a fob, so like I land here,
No using that word anymore. You're banned from using that word.
so
Okay.
I'm like I show up and I have no friends. There's no family living close by, and I'm like, okay, how am I supposed to know what's going on around me? And so I just got like a bouquet and like a chocolate box, and I went and knocked on my neighbor's door just to like say hi. Just moved in next door, uh, and so long story short, I go in, I knock at the door. This person opens the door, and they're like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Hi, I'm your new neighbor. I just moved in." And I just presented the bouquet and the chocolate, and they looked at me. They were like, "What do you want?" I'm like, "I, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm sorry."
Oh, that's so
And
endearing on your part. That's lovely.
that was like my first experience, like just show up, and then so months later, when I started once I started making friends, when I told them that, well, this is what I did, and their reaction was like, "Did you not know this is Vancouver?" I'm like, I did not know anything because we come from a culture where this is the norm. This is
Yeah,
how you welcome people, and
absolutely.
you just extend that hospitality to them, and then you're like, okay, let me know if you need anything. Um,
It's not for me to tell you how
mhm,
to be or how to act, but I don't think you should lose that part of yourself. It's their loss if they don't pick up on it. But
mhm.
if we're gonna be spread all over the world, our choice
Yeah.
or not, we are. It is what it is. I think
Mhm.
the most beautiful thing is for us to really focus on bringing the beauty of our culture to the rest of the world rather than so much
Yes.
focus on integration into what we see around us because this is not a real culture anyway. I mean, I know I'm a
Mhm.
little critical, a little overly critical, but at the end of the
No,
day,
no,
we're not practicing indigenous culture, are we? We're practicing
no.
something
Yeah.
that's made up by people who
Hmm.
have taken this country over, right? Or this land over. I'm not
Hmm.
saying they're all bad people and neither are we. We're
Hmm.
also here, so it's the same story.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, why not bring like the really good values of where we come from, um,
Yeah.
and introduce people to it? They can take it on or not, but at least you remain who you are that way.
Of course. I mean, that's why Afghan suffer. Like this is the entire journey.
Love
Like
it.
introducing that little bits and pieces of like, I'm not making this up. Like here, like listen from this
The only
person,
thing
from
is
this.
chocolates and flowers is it's a little romantic, so
It's,
they might have gotten
yeah,
the
it's
wrong.
like yeah, I shouldn't have taken anything else,
Well,
but
maybe just cookies next time or something. It's a little less like a little less
oh,
intimidating.
now I'm super scared of doing that. Like, trust me, this has been like an entire year living in
Just
the
make it a more
apartment.
simple gift. Make it more
Yeah,
simple gift.
I still don't know like who my neighbors are. Like after an entire year,
They
we're
don't
like,
deserve you. They don't deserve you.
well, this has been a very interesting chat, Birajan. Do you have anything to add? Any favorite memory? Anything, please. Just something for the viewers to show, like, or yeah, just to show like what Afghans are like. Just your favorite memory. Anything. It's I know it's broad, so pick
It's okay.
whatever
It's
you
not
want
your
to
fault.
pick.
It's my fault because it's just I have so many and it's hard for me to pick. But I think
You can give us multiples, please.
thank you. Thank you. Well, I will say like I guess I'll tell you a story that surprised me. Okay. I remember
Okay.
going in, because I think ultimately what we're trying to do is not say
Mhm.
Afghanistan has this and this and this, but we're really trying to say, like, let's, let's dismantle some of the ideas that you already
Mhm.
have in your mind of Afghanistan, right? So it's more
Yeah.
about undoing um, the, the, undoing the damage really that's in
Mhm.
everyone's mind, whether they're Afghan or not, but they haven't seen it up close, right? So one of
Mhm.
the things that one of the exact moments I remember so clearly is going, I think it was not to my family's house, but to a family's house, and
Mhm.
there was an older man, so he had a white beard, and he is very early on in my time in Afghanistan, and he just
Mhm.
looked like someone who I immediately thought this guy's gonna hate me because I'm a woman traveling by myself. Da da da. He's the
Yeah.
first one that's gonna judge me. He just looked really stern and conservative.
Mhm.
You know what I'm talking about. So I was
Mhm.
there with I think my colleague, and she was related to the family. So at the end of this gathering, it was like a dinner and there was conversation. By the end of it, we were best friends. He was so jokey. He was so smart. He was so like um, encouraging, and said that,
Mhm.
he was the first person to really make me feel like I had done something that was extraordinary, leaving Canada and going to Afghanistan. And he didn't and when I'm not saying that he thought I was amazing because I'm from Canada, which some people unfortunately did think that that was something of status. It wasn't
Mhm.
like that. It was more just like he just thought that this was so cool that I would go on this adventure from Canada to Afghanistan. And it was the opposite of what I would expect from looking at him.
Mhm.
And he was very adamant about education. He was very adamant about his daughters and his granddaughters going to school. He said it was more important to him than the sons because they'd get themselves figured out anyway. My point is, visually, like I had been taught, we've all been taught that, and very conservative old man from our part of the world is really the biggest enemy of someone who feels that girls should have this and girls should have
Yeah.
that. As time went on, he was just the first example, but it was just constant. Girls are very not only close to their dad in the good cases, there's bad cases too.
Mhm.
But in the good cases, young girls are so close with their dad, and that's their really biggest source of inspiration and biggest encouragement. Is oftentimes their own father is such an
Mhm.
example for them. I met very few of the strong women I met didn't have a story of their dad being the real, you know, flame
Yeah.
behind them. And I think that's something I really like to share with people because I don't think, because I can also admit that I came with that too. And I hope that helps
Mhm.
people understand it's okay that you think that. It's not a judgment of you, but to really stop
Mhm.
and pause and consider that it might actually be mostly made up. And really, because it was made up too, um, everyone's going to get mad at me if I say it's made up. I know that we do have issues and problems in this specific department, but that we also have another side to it. It's not every
Mhm.
family. It's definitely not our natural instinct. And yeah, we have a problem with what pressures are being put on families and on
Mhm.
their fathers, for example, to keep their daughters safe from certain things. But
Mhm.
ultimately, there's so much encouragement for daughters,
Yes.
granddaughters, nieces, sisters from Afghan men and from Afghan grandfathers, and long
Mhm.
beards that look really intimidating aren't necessarily.
They're normally like the kindest souls. If you get a chance to like sit with them and have a chat, um,
Absolutely.
I always find myself like one of those lost souls that who can't really connect to our current age.
Yeah.
It's normally it's very weird. I know, like when I meet my friends, and if I'm lucky to meet their parents, I actually get along with the parents a lot better than
Yeah.
the kids.
Yeah.
And my friends, they just joke with me. They're like, you know what? Honestly, we believe you that you are way too old. But you're like, you don't talk to us like this. And I was like, I don't know. There's just something about these people. Like, the stories. They're so mesmerizing.
I think Afghans
It's
have old souls. I think we generally are. This is not, again, to put anyone else down, but the value of elders is different in that part of the world than it is here. We
Mhm.
really do value advice from them. Their experience
Yeah.
is taken very
Mhm.
seriously. You get your
Mhm.
advice for any big life decision from them. They're not just set aside because they're old and they don't matter now. So it's part of your
Yeah.
culture also to really
Mhm.
to know that. I think some people
Yeah.
figure it out in every culture. So they might figure it out, but in our culture, it's part of how you're raised. So
Yeah. It's basically just upbringing. Like I was
but
about to say like kullagi kaka mamas.
yeah,
Like everyone is your
you know the
uncle and
value.
auntie.
You know their value. I mean, but you see the example I gave you earlier was an example, I think, of the damage that can be done, right? It was being raised
Mhm.
in diaspora, being raised away. I was taught that this
Yeah.
subconsciously, I thought this image of this very like harsh looking older man, like he's not going to like me at all. And then look what happened, so you really have to get back to, you have to really put away all of those stereotypes and just allow it to show its own face, and you'll be surprised so often.
Mhm. It, 100%. I totally agree. So we're just going to get to the end of our segment here. And I promise you, this won't be our last chat because I believe there's a lot of like untouched topics that we didn't even scratch the surface, and we
Yeah,
would love to
definitely.
hear them. But before we end our conversation or this episode, um, there are three questions normally
Mhm.
that we do ask.
Okay.
The first one is, what's your favorite Afghan food, and why is it your favorite? The memory that makes it favorite.
Lubia. I love Lubia, and
Yeah.
it's there's two stories. One is there's an orphanage in Parwan, and they
Hmm.
just made it. Parwan tends to like their food a little spicier, just like I do. So they like cut up a lot of fresh chilies inside of their Lubia as well. It was
Hmm.
delicious. I was just really hungry, and it was delicious. And another time I was in Shoranao, and they had me, this was like 2005, they had me photocopying like a stack of papers like this. Just go take it to this,
Yeah.
the stationery stores, go take it there and photocopy it. And that's like 7 hours of photocopying. So I got really hungry at the time, and I couldn't leave. And we were right in the middle of the city. So I just, the people, they sell just straight from the dig out on the streets.
Yeah.
And you just borrow their plate and you give it back after you're done. You know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. But I mean,
Of course.
mostly people who were living in guest houses or came from from abroad or whatever, you wouldn't always get that experience. You're mostly going to go to a restaurant, or even, doesn't mean fancy restaurant, but I don't know if
Mhm.
everybody got the chance to eat straight street food meal like I did. That was fantastic. It was so good. It was just, they give you the glass plate, they put the big thing of birinj and then the big thing of lubia on it, and you get bread with it too, and all of it's like $1 in total. It was like 40 Afghani or something, and it was one of the best meals I ever had. It was fantastic. It was so good. It's one of my favorites. It's a When it's good, it's really good. Lubia.
It it is. Lubia is also my favorite.
Really?
I love lumpia. It's yeah, because most of the people like from like our people, they
Mhm.
love meat, especially red meat.
Yes.
But I think in my household, I was always not just me, but I think like my siblings, we're all pretty much the same. Like we have a good diet, and but one thing that my mom always knew was how much I love and crave lumpia. It's like at least once a week, I used to ask her, it's like, Mom, lumpia, please.
And the kids, right? Everybody would always think the kids in the orphanages, wherever else, like, oh, let's get them kebab, or let's get them mantu, or
Mhm.
something special. But they wanted lubia. Like, that was their favorite. That was their actual favorite
Yeah,
meal, almost always. With
yeah.
um, you have to have a couple scoops of yogurt with it too, and then I'm satisfied. So that's my final answer.
Oh, I think people don't understand like the way we cook lumpia
Mhm.
is way different than your normal beans or like you can't compare it. Lumpia is lumpia.
Yeah, so good.
You can't compare it. All right. So, second question would be, what's your favorite poem or phrase in Dari or Pashto? Something that
The
you repeat or just
Uh,
love.
I I say non appeals Pishoni was all the time. I think it reminds me of just all of us. At the end of the day, it takes so
Mhm.
little to get happiness from us. So non
Yes.
appeals Pishoni was means like, translated for those who don't speak Farsi, is bread and onions, and Pishoni was is like saying like your forehead is not in any kind of frown, right? Like, it's open.
Yeah.
It's clear. There's no frown lines on
Mhm.
your forehead. You're happy. So essentially saying it takes very little. That's all you need to be happy, is just to be fed. You're good. You're healthy. You're safe. You're all set. And I love
That's
that
all it
because,
takes.
yeah, it really doesn't take a lot. Even when we talk about like, oh, the demands that people are making, it's, you compare it
Mhm.
to other parts of the world, it's so little bit. It's so little. We want to be
Yeah.
safe. We want to live, happy. We're with our own culture. That's it. Nobody's asking for a whole lot. It's and it's not
Mhm.
even just what the Afghans ask for. It's that with almost nothing, there's so much happiness.
Mhm. Yeah. 100%. 100%. And the third question would be, I mean, you kind of said it, so I feel bad to put you on the spot again. Uh, so, one place in Afghanistan where you would like to take us, one place where you'd be like, this is why you should come and visit Afghanistan.
Well, it's a different answer than the first one, anyways.
Bamiyan? Okay.
Yeah, that's visual. And yes,
Hmm.
I'm currently a little bitter about Afghanistan being treated as a tourist country, so I'm not even gonna give that
Hmm.
as my answer. Um, I think I would say a village in general.
Mm.
And the one, like, I mean, and I really think it could be any village. The way you're treated in a village as a visitor is unprecedented. There's no way you've ever been treated that kindly ever in your life. And I'm not even saying at the home that you were visiting. I remember the first time that I was walking, and the first one I went to was in Paktia, and it was fantastic. But in every province I went to, things like this would happen, where I'm walking and just an old grandmother would insist that I take some bread because it's fresh and it's hot. You have to rip a piece and eat it. Like, she doesn't know me. She's never seen me in her life. She doesn't want to know anything about me. She's not bothering me. She just insists because non doras, you have to have a piece of it. Like, it's that
Yeah.
level of you are family with whoever is in front of you. I don't think anyone can match that kind of hospitality. We say hospitality, but and I love Kabul, but it's still a city. There's some, come over. We're gonna make this fancy dish for you. We're gonna do this for you. In the village, it's like even when you're outside, people are taking care of you because they know you're not from there, so they're just being kind to you at a level that I don't think you can match it anywhere else. There's just no way.
I totally agree because like in my hometown, Kandar,
Hmm.
anytime we used to go to these rural villages, and I think one thing that I miss the most, if if it was during the pomegranate season, well, another Kandar, that's hands down.
Hmm.
Like,
I bet.
but in the villages, it was always Shlumbe,
Oh,
the dough.
yeah.
It's I don't know, like we can talk about it, but it's so difficult to put those emotions in words. It's completely off the charts.
It's definitely served with love, and it's not just
Yeah,
there's meaning behind it. You're very much being welcomed. You're not just being given something cold to drink. It's really made
yeah,
with love. Now imagine Shlomo
exactly.
with Diaspora together.
Yeah, that would be a dream for sure. Um, so Mina John, we're officially at the end of the episode. But before we say bye to our viewers and anyone who's watching this, do you have any last words for them? Do you want to leave them with anything?
Yeah, I really appreciate again this opportunity. I know we just chatted casually, but at the same time,
Mhm.
I wanted to say to anyone who wants to learn more about Afghanistan that I empathize and sympathize with the fact that you don't have a lot of resources. Um, so I really do dedicate what I can of my energy to give you that more positive, or at least more detailed side of Afghanistan, so you get to know it in a more human way and not just a headline way. So I have um, some fiction stories coming, and I have just on my Instagram and in general to pay forward the positivity that I saw. I try to do that for you, and I would love for people to be equipped so that they can carry it on. So we're not just labeled in such simplistic ways, but we have to do that together.
Of course, uh, definitely. Well, this has been an amazing chat, and thank you all for joining us. I know we went a little bit over time, but these conversations they don't normally happen every day. But hope you guys enjoy it, and we would love to see you in the next episode. But for this one, Khudafiz, the Khuda Kaman.
Like, come on, Khudafiz.